chi phụ ca gì khê cậu hồi gia tăng đồ nhỏ còn cho lệnh nè lệnh tư chi nặng còn chữ chi đồ tăng em ni chi tăng đồ nhỏ còn cho lỡ tư ni ta lỡ nhỏ cha em nụ do lỡ tư em nhà ni giờ phụ ca chi phụ ca e đồ gì khen đi em gia tăng đồ nhỏ còn cho lệnh nè lệnh tư em chỉ mà nặng ta cả chú tổ chỉ đồ tăng giá trị tăng đồ
Until the 1970s, few in the United States had heard of the Hmong or seen their textile arts. In 1975, as political refugees from Southeast Asia, 300 Hmong arrived in America. Today, that number has grown to nearly 100,000. While the origins of the Hmong are not clear, it is possible that they existed as early as 10,000 BC in China. The Hmong are non-Chinese, who for centuries have settled in the mountains of southern China. From the 18th to the 20th century, some groups of Hmong migrated south out of China into the highlands of Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, and the Union of Myanmar. The basis of the existence of these mountain people is freedom and independence. The word Hmong means freedom, especially from outside domination. The Hmong who now live in America came from the highlands of Laos. There, they practiced slash and burn farming, spoke their own language rather than Lao, and followed ancient traditions of agriculture, crafts, and religion. Their religion, called animism, recognizes animate forces in nature. The Hmong, although widely dispersed geographically, have kept their own language alive in spite of centuries of change and migration. Until the 1950s, they had no known writing system. Legends claim that in ancient times the Hmong had a written language, which has been lost. Some believe that the Batik patterns used in Hmong textiles are the remains of the lost alphabet. The Hmong are divided into two major groups, the white Hmong and the blue Hmong. The white Hmong wear a very finely pleated white skirt as part of their dress. The blue Hmong also wear a very finely pleated skirt, which is partly decorated with batik using indigo dye. These blue Hmong skirts also include decoration made with cross-stitching and reverse applique. In the guerrilla warfare against the communists in northern Laos during the 1960s and 70s, a large number of Hmong men were used as foot soldiers by the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Their help was extremely valuable because they knew so well the densely forested highlands. However, once victorious, the communist government took revenge on the Hmong, gassing the people and burning their villages. To avoid genocide, they fled their mountain homes. The Hmong lost their mountains, their age-old pattern of semi-nomadic living, and many males from the age of 12 and older. Hmong casualties were 100 times greater than the United States casualties. Many Hmong did escape over the Mekong River into Thailand, where they lived in refugee camps. Ban Dao is the Hmong word to describe all of the techniques used by Hmong women to decorate cloth for clothing. Pa means flower and Dao means cloth. The techniques Hmong women practice are embroidery, batik, reverse applique, and story cloth stitchery, a type of embroidery which has developed in the refugee camps after the war in Southeast Asia. In Laos, all young Hmong women learn these techniques of Pan Dao. At the age of 5 or 6, a Hmong girl learned from her mother and other relatives. It took many years of practice to create clothing which used the Pan Dao techniques of embroidery, batik, and reverse applique. Hmong women in Laos used to produce their own cloth as well as decorate it. First, the women grew hemp, which was called ma. The hemp was picked and spun into fibers, which were first bleached and then woven into cloth on a special loom. The blue Hmong dyed the cloth with indigo, and the white Hmong left the cloth natural. In Laos, Hmong women wore every day what we now call the traditional clothing. The women made special clothing for the New Year celebration. These special clothes were also worn at weddings, funerals, naming ceremonies, and healing rituals. During the 30 years that the Hmong had lived away from their homes in Laos, they have gone through many changes. Ban Dao has undergone changes too. The women use the same designs and patterns which have been passed down from generation to generation. However, in America, the Hmong must take classes in English and work in factories, so they no longer have time to make the clothes themselves. Here it is quicker to buy cloth. Some Hmong women prefer to buy synthetic cloth because of its shining surface. This cloth reminds them of earlier times in their homeland where they spent many hours polishing and waxing the hemp cloth to create clothing which sparkled. War and the life in the refugee camps did not prevent Hmong women from making Pan Dao. At this time, a new Hmong textile form, which is called story cloth, developed. These are squares of cloth decorated by hand stitchery, which depict Hmong legends and history as well as war memories. The story cloths record the lost traditional past as well as recent history. The story cloth changed the Hmong oral traditionals into visual narratives. Even though many Hmong women now dress like Americans, the unmarried women still wear the traditional clothing at the New Year celebration. Using traditional Hmong patterns, many women have made things of use in the American home: wall hangings, tablecloths, and bedspreads. The Hmong needlework has also been adapted to American fashions, embellishing coats, shirts, jackets, scarves, vests, and aprons. The embroidery designs, which once symbolized traditional Hmong beliefs, even appear today as decoration on Christian church vestments, as shown by the stole worn by Father Bill Tangway. Using detailed cross-stitch, La Hyong displays a partially finished altar cloth. The Hmong make Pan Dao for New Year's, but they also make things to sell to Americans and to give as gifts to American friends and to family members. In 1976, the first Hmong family to arrive in Providence, Rhode Island was the Vangs. In the next few years, 8 clan leaders settled in Providence and sent word to family members in the refugee camps in Thailand to come to Providence. Some of the clan names of Hmong who now settle in Providence are Ja, Gu, Ka, Lo, Mua, Tho, Vang, Vu, Yang and Xiong.
ทูเป็นทางการเตี้ยก็โอเทียนจะกินตัวลองในบ้านเตี้ยตัวเดียว
In spite of the many abrupt and extreme changes in their lives, the Hmong are maintaining many of their traditional ways while integrating with life in America. In Providence, the Hmong-Lao Unity Association helps this happen. Every 2 years, the Hmong community elects a president who takes charge of organizing the year's events, such as the New Year celebration. The president also makes decisions on the problems within the Hmong community and assists new arrivals from the refugee camps in Thailand. The president works with 11 board members and 6 members of the Legal Advisory Council. Jova Lo, a white Hmong, arrived in Providence with her husband, Zepa Lo, and son, Sa Tho, in 1987. She was born in Sang Quang, a village in the mountains of Laos. This village where the lords lived was destroyed by the Viet Cong in 1975, and Jo and her family fled. For 5 years, they survived in the jungle. Sometimes they constructed temporary shelters of banana leaves and ate tree bark. Finally, they crossed the Mekong River into Thailand and remained there for 7 years in the lowland refugee camps Ban Vinai. Some of Jo Lor's relatives were already living in Ban Vinai. Her sister-in-law, Bang Yang, was the first one that she remembers making story cloths. Bang Yang asked a Hmong man in the camp, Yao Yang, if he could make drawings on cloth of animals, plants, and flowers from their mountains homeland in Laos. She wanted to remember these images, and she filled in the drawing forms with color stitchery. The Hmong had no written language to document their past. These story cloths took the place of photographs and books. In Hmong, this new stitchery was called Ban Dao Chia, when animals and plants were drawn, and Ban Dao Dan Nang, where stories and legends were depicted. Most Hmong villages of the Laotian mountains had no schools. Occasionally, a family could afford to send a child to boarding school in the city of Siang Quang or the capital city of Vientiane. Girls were not sent to school, only the boys. Jo thinks that this might be where Yao Yang learned to draw. Before she left Ban Vinai for America, Jo asked Yao Yang to make drawings on many cloths so she could continue her story cloth stitchery here. Jo also brought to America many color threads. Jo works quickly using a running stitch to outline and a satin stitch to fill in the drawn images. When the thread runs short, she pulls the needle to the back and stitches over several stitches and cuts the thread. Using her imagination, Jo picks the next color thread and continues, making stitches very neatly and close together. Both Jo and her husband, Zhao Lo, need to work to survive in America. She does not have time to go to school to learn English. Jo has work in a factory and also as a house cleaner. As often as she can, Jo works on her stitchery but does not have the time for it that she had in Laos or in the refugee camp. She continues to do stitchery on the original drawings made for her by Yao Yang at Camp Ban Vinai. She feels that it is very important to use her spare time to work on different types of bandao. Zhuo is working on a piece of cross-stitch embroidery. These decorated strips will be used as cuffs and decorations on the edge of the jacket of the female dress for the New Year's. Cross-stitch is the first type of embroidery a Hmong girl learns. Zhuo remembers learning cross-stitch from her elder sister when she was 8 years old. Now she teaches other young women in America. Her 8-year-old niece, Gia, has just arrived from Camp Ban Vinai. She has already learned cross-stitch and is now working on a story cloth. Hmong women do cross-stitch in 2 different ways. Both methods look the same on the front but different on the back. The first method, Lo Bloa, is being demonstrated by Zhuo with a blue thread. In this method, the first arm of the cross is completed for several inches, and then the second arm is added in a return direction. The second method of doing cross-stitch is called Lao Keng, and is been done here with red thread. In this method, the first and second arms of the cross-stitch are made consecutively. In both methods, the direction of the top arm of the cross is always the same direction throughout the piece of the stitchery. Zhuo begins the cross-stitch project by cutting a piece of white balanced weave cloth the size of the dress pocket. Zhuo uses green for the first shape to be done in cross-stitch. She ends by stitching over other stitches in the back. Here Zhuo makes the same design in pink cross-stitch and then repeats the green shape again. As Zhuo continues sewing the pink and the green pattern cross-stitch project, she uses the Lao King method. After filling in all of the green and pink shapes with cross-stitch, Zhuo completes the piece by adding decorative triangles using a satin stitch. The final step is to finish the edges with applique and tiny beads. The piece will then be added to the women's jacket. Zhuo also decorates cloth using very fine chain stitch. The chain stitch is particularly well done by white Hmong women. She begins by cutting a square of pink cloth which will be decorated. On the back of this, she bastes a piece of white cloth to strengthen the surface. Using a running stitch across a core thread, Zhuo outlines a divided square. This section square would be embellished by adding tiny chain stitch outlines of curved and straight shapes. Zhuo is doing much in her new life in Rhode Island, working 3 days a week, teaching stitchery classes at the church, and exhibiting in local museums. She also takes care of her family and spends as much time as she can keeping alive the tradition of Paj Ntaub, which she learned in such a different time and place.
Nhà dân lo lặng tu ở cha trong lo lặng cứ lặng thì yo trả đó 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 mua ra bê lặng nhà lặng chỉ nhớ đủ suy trong lẽ tòa thế ta cá tia ya tỏ trong bê qua nhà yo qua nhà lỡ bê chẳng thế lặng.
Shang Yava, her husband Gua, and their 5 children arrived in Providence in 1987. They are white Hmong. She and her husband were forced to leave their Laotian village of Tomuka in 1976 and spent 10 years in the Thailand refugee camp Ban Vinai. 5 of her children were born in Ban Vinai and 2 more were born in Providence. Sheng does a very fine detail kind of Paj Ntaub called dacha. This minute reverse applique and stitchery decorates the collar, which is attached to the jacket of the New Year's outfit worn by Hmong women. This collar is a special part of the dress dating from ancient times when the Hmong lived in China. The Hmong proudly wore the collar to differentiate themselves from the Chinese, who had no such collar showing in the back of their clothing. Sheng is left-handed and works only in the daytime. She sits on a small low stool near a window to take advantage of the natural light. Sheng remembers learning Paj Ntaub from her mother when she was 9 years old. She started by making a belt which was decorated with cross-stitch patterns. She did not go to school. She remembers that it was her job to feed the chickens, cows, and horses. Occasionally, a man would come through her village selling yarns for Paj Ntaub. If he did not come, she would go to the town of Nahia, a day's walk away, to buy yarns and threads. The most important annual Paj Ntaub project is a new dress for the New Year's for all of the unmarried females in the family. In December, as time for the New Year celebration draws near, Sheng's husband, Gua, helps with the housework and taking care of the children so that she has more time for Paj Ntaub. She remembers that this was also true in Laos. The entire process of making the delicate reverse applique on the collar of the woman's jacket is accomplished without using patterns or drawings on the cloth. The repeat pattern is laid out by using a series of careful folds of the cloth. To begin, a piece of white cotton the size of the collar is measured and cut into an exact rectangle. Fold marks are a guide to cutting. Next, a series of folds mark the divisions of the patterning to be used in the reverse applique. After creasing the cloth, the point of a fine needle is used to mark the fold lines more clearly. With the folds completed, cuts are made in the corners of the design. These will later allow Sheng to begin stitching the reverse applique. The cloth, which will be the top surface of the collar, is now ready to have collar pieces of cloth layer underneath. Pink and orange rectangles are cut. This will be basted to the back of the white cloth with the pink rectangle next to the white. The orange rectangle will not show as a collar in the reverse applique. It is added for stability. Sheng cuts a rectangle from a green cloth and one from a white cloth. These will be basted underneath the other cloth layers. The green cloth will show in the reverse applique, but again the white is used for stability and will not show. In Laos, Sheng uses silk thread, but here she uses nylon. Before beginning the reverse applique stitching, she splits the fine nylon threads to make them even finer. She begins tucking under the edges of the white top layer and sewing them down with very tiny neat stitches. This reveals the green color underneath the top layer. A zigzag shape is cut near the green corner. Sheng stitches back these edges again, showing the green cloth underneath. Sheng works very carefully and meticulously. She is happy to be able to work at home and be near her family. Having finished the reverse applique parts of the collar, Sheng begins adding decorative blue triangles using a satin stitch. She measures the size and placement of these triangles by holding her thread tight and lining it up with the pattern. Again, she uses no marking tool to place the design on the cloth. Sheng is changing the color of the nylon thread to pink. She must thin out the strand to make it fine enough for sewing. She knots the new strand of pink thread and starts sewing the pink triangles. Sheng's husband and father-in-law look after her children while she works on the collar. Next, Sheng stitches tiny metallic star shapes into some of the pink and green areas. The final step is to finish the edges of the reverse applique design. This is done by sewing narrow strips on 3 sides. The 4th side is sewn to a patterned fabric, which will be attached to the back of the jacket. Sheng takes time out from stitching to attend to her son. She goes back to sewing with her son nearby. Using very fine thread and a fine needle, Sheng stitches the strip around the edge. To complete the collar, a hem is made around 3 sides. Now, this fine example of da chaw made by Sheng Yang Wang is finished.
Mua luôn đã nó tí nào nó còn. Chị bỏ ra tay liền.
Dạ. Này, trong những cái gì đó.
Dạ mình nhỏ chứ chung. Chọc vào.
Because of the war in Laos, Li Kang, a blue Hmong, left her village of Khong Yang with her husband and 2 small sons. They fled to the small city of Long Hae. There she had another son and 2 daughters. Her husband was killed in the fighting. After spending 1 year in Ban Vinai refugee camp, she came to Providence with 2 sons. Li Kang is decorating cloth using Batik patterning, which is a specialty done by blue Hmong women. In Providence, Li is using cotton cloth purchased from a store. However, in Laos, she remembers weaving flax cloth on a loom, something learned from her mother. Li brought from Laos a piece of flax cloth she wove 30 years ago. She considers it a special treasure from the past. With a spoon edge, Li makes indented lines on the cloth as guides for drawing with wax. The drawing tool she uses is called dia da tia, which translates wax spoon. These tools are handmade by Hmong men. Li uses beeswax, which is heated in a pan over a charcoal fire. This long narrow piece of batik will be incorporated into a da or a pleated skirt. Li says the designs are very old, going back generations. These patterns she learned from her mother. Li considers them to be not so much pictures of things, but as looking more like writing. Using a hard edge, Li Kang makes indented marks on the cloth to guide her in making the lines drawings with her dia da dia or wax spoon. She works on a 1-foot square section at a time. Rolling up the portion which is already waxed, she goes on to the next section. When the wax drawings are finished, Li is ready for the dyeing. Along with the cloth for the skirt, Li has also waxed patterns on the 3 rectangles, which will be the centers for baby carrying cloths. In Laos, Li made dye from the indigo plant. In Rhode Island, the climate is not warm enough to grow the indigo plant. Here, Li is using a synthetic indigo, which has been used by American dyers for some time. Since there are 5 grandchildren in Li Kang's home, she has decided to do the dyeing in the studio of a local Providence fiber artist. The synthetic indigo vat contains zinc dust, which in 1991 was reclassified as a toxic substance by the EPA. Thus, when the dyeing is finished, the spent vat must be taken to an approved disposal site. Li much prefers the plant for dyeing and has written to her sister in Thailand asking her to send the natural indigo. In her Laotian village, Li used the green part of the plant and mixed it with water and the powder from a burned stone. This mixture fermented for from 3 to 5 days and could be used when the bubbles stopped. The wax cloth was wetted with a wine spray before immersion into the dye vat. After repeated dippings into the dye bath to achieve the color she wanted, Li now must remove the wax from the cloth. In her basement, away from the grandchildren, Li is heating a large container of water to boil away the wax. She immerses the waxed pieces and stirs frequently. Li skims wax from the surface of the boiling water. She transfers the cloth to clean hot rinse water and repeats the boiling bath and clean rinse water 2 more times. The last rinse water is made by heating the water, which remains in the manufacture of tofu. Li says this last rinse will give a final special cleaning for the batiked cloth. Upstairs, Li is inspecting the de-waxed wet cloth. She finishes the day by playing with her grandson, who is fond of being close to her, and a baby carrying cloth she made for him when he was born.
Cha lo lăng tu cha trong nó đông li tòa di khi li
Zia Vu Mua, a white monk, arrived in Providence in 1987 with her husband, Lu Mua, and 3 small children. She brought with her pieces of reverse applique that she had made as a young woman in Laos. These pieces were to become belts, but when the war came, she could not find the silk to complete them. The type of reverse applique that Zia does is called Nang Tzu, which means elephant foot in Hmong. She learned this technique from her mother. At the age of 8, she started doing cross-stitch, and by the time she was 18, she had become very accomplished at reverse applique. She made Nang Tzu panels for herself and her 2 sisters for the New Year's dresses. To begin the Nang Tzu process, Zia cuts a square of cloth. Like other Hmong women, she measures by folding and pulling threads and not by making marks on the cloth. This square of light blue cloth will be the top layer in the reverse applique. Zia makes 2 diagonal folds in the square. She basted the folded edges. Zia's life is not easy. She now has 6 children and works 4 nights a week in a factory. Her aunt and other family members help with the care of the children. Zia cuts, freehand, a circle out of stiff paper. Using the paper as a pattern, Zia cuts a spiral shape, which is the main form in the Nang Tzu or elephant foot pattern. Most of the cloth and thread that she uses is from a large supply that she had brought with her from Thailand. On the basted sides, Zia cut 7 slits, which will be important later in the reverse applique process. Zia pulls out the basting and opens up the square of light blue cloth. It has 4 cut spirals and 4 diagonal rows of V-shaped cuts. She places the light blue square with the cutouts on top of a darker blue piece of cloth. She cuts its new square larger than the light blue square. With careful basting, she attaches the light blue square to the dark blue square. Zia's 16-year-old niece helps take care of her baby. She was orphaned during the war and now lives with Zia. She carries the child in a traditional baby carrier, which leaves her hands free to work on cross-stitch. Zia starts the reverse applique process by pushing back the edges of the cut spiral and sewing them with tiny invisible stitches. This reveals the darker cloth underneath. Zia's husband, Lu, is a member of the Hmong-Lao Unity Association. Among all the family photographs on the mantel is a picture of General Van Pao visiting a meeting of the Hmong-Lao Unity Association. General Van Pao is the leader of the Hmong in the United States and lives in Montana. 1 week later, Zia has finished the 4 swords in the center. She is now stitching the rows of radiating shapes going out from the center. The V-shaped slits mark where to cut the radiating lines. She cuts a line, stitches down one side only, and then cuts the next radiating line. While Zia is sewing down the second side of the radiating lines, her mother, Blia Yang Vu, helps with the baby. Zia and Blia talk about their life in Laos and the 10 years spent in the refugee camps. Zia made many Nang Tzu there. She remembers buying cloth at a market near the camp. Blia brings out bandao that she made in Laos, aprons with very long sashes. The ends are decorated with fine reverse applique and chain stitch. Blia and Zia are full of memories, and Blia decides to try on the long apron and sash over her American skirt and sweater. The oldest treasures from Laos that these women have are 2 white Hmong skirts. Blia's mother grew the flax and wove the skirts. Blia does not try them on because they are so fragile. Blia recalls how she and her 4 children wander from place to place in the jungle for 2 years as they try to escape the fighting. Finally, they reached the Mekong River. Zia remembers how she and her mother, brothers and sisters had to cross the Mekong River in rubber tires. Because she was the strongest swimmer, Zia went first with the others tied to her by a rope. Blia could not swim and was holding her baby son. It took 3 hours to cross the river. Zia Vu Mo, another fine Hmong artist to settle in Providence, tries to continue the traditions of her people through her pandao. Her life in America is not easy, but she and her family are safe, and there is the promise of an education for all of her children. Juan, Sang, Li, and Zia are all worried about the future of pandao. Most of their daughters are doing cross-stitch and chain stitch. However, because they are busy with school or work, few are learning the fine cutting and stitching involved in reverse applique. These women cannot imagine the continuation of their culture without the presence of pandao. New Year's, courtship, birth ceremonies, and gift-giving would not be the same thing if pandao no longer existed.
Okay. My mom said that in the future, if there's no more elders like people who are in their age range, then people like who are in my age range will not be able to have any more pandao. If they do or are able to make, or if we are able to make sew the traditional clothing, we won't be able to do the embroidery stuff, especially the collar, and that means that pandao will become extinct.
cha em đủ do là tư cho ní gia tăng đầu đỏ có cho lệnh na cứ lệnh tự chí nặng có chú chế tờ tăng ní yang lý cứ phụ cá tờ phụ cá gì khê cổ hỏi gia tăng đầu đỏ có cho lệnh na lệnh tự chí nặng có chú chế tờ tăng ni chỉ tăng đầu đỏ còn cho lỡ tư ni ta lỡ nhổ cha em đủ do lỡ tư cha ni giờ phụ cá đồ phụ cá gì phụ cá e đồ gì khen đi cha tăng đầu đỏ còn cho lệnh na lệnh tư chỉ mà nặng ta cả chú tổ chỉ đờ tăng nhá chỉ tăng đầu đỏ còn cho ni lỡ tư cả tè tổ tè lỡ tì nụ do lỡ tư cha ni giờ lại là có số nhá tì ta chân nhá gió ta tư nhụ ta có phụ lưu du lại chân ni lu tha ta tư nhụ ta có phụ sang tư ba gia tăng đầu đỏ có cho lệnh na lệnh tư chỉ mà nặng ta có chú tổ chỉ đờ tăng giá chỉ tăng đầu đỏ có cho ni nhá chữ chả mà ít cho cha ni giờ lại là có sao nhá thì ta chẳng nhớ nhớ tàng cha tư nhụ ta có phụ hỏi lưu ta cho lưu du lại chờ nhớ lưu ta ta tư nhụ ta có phụ ta tư ti cha tăng đầu đỏ còn cho lệnh na cứ lệnh tự chí nặng còn chú tổ chí tơ ta ni chỉ tăng đầu đỏ còn cho ni nhá chữ chả mong ý gì ni đủ do lỡ tư cha em đủ